We'd been dying to go pearl diving in Tahiti ever since we saw it used as a challenge on The Amazing Race, so we were excited to find out about the Bora Pearl Company, a Tahitian-owned family business on the island of Bora Bora. Pearl farming in the area began in 1966. Photographer Erwin Christian and his wife Ate opened the island's first pearl boutique 11 years later. Their daughter Taya's interests in marine biology and jewelry design eventually led the family to create the farm, one of the only places in Tahiti where you can actually go pearl diving and find your own locally cultivated pearl. When we arrived, they gave us a tour of the facility, teaching us how the oysters are grown. It starts with the introduction of a foreign substance, in this case a round piece of an oyster shell harvested from the Mississippi River, into a black-lipped oyster. For some reason, this is the only pearl nucleus these oysters will accept. They explain to us each stage of the growth process, from the grafting and the birth of the pearl to the cultivation and harvesting process, a meticulous operation that takes 2 years. Even then, only 3 out of every 100 pearls harvested is good enough to be considered perfect. We learned that these so-called black pearls actually come in 5 different colors: blue, green, eggplant, peacock, and gold. The luster or reflective quality of the pearl's surface is a key factor in determining its value. The French Polynesian Parliament regulation defined 4 basic qualities based on the number of imperfections found on the surface of the pearl, as well as the intensity of the luster, with an A rating boasting imperfections on less than 10% of the pearl's entire surface. After this brief education, it was time to go pearl diving, so we strapped on our masks and snorkels and swam out into a gorgeous blue lagoon where we saw rays and all sorts of tropical fish swimming below. We saw 4 farming sections spread out around the lagoon, each anchored by rope to a bottom we couldn't see. Each section had around 22 lines attached, with 4 to 6 oysters per line. Guests dive down with a dive master, unhook one line, and then bring it to the surface to find out what's inside. It sounds simple enough, but with lines secured a good 10 to 15 feet below the surface, it took a really deep breath to get down there long enough to execute any sort of action. It's hard to imagine pearl diving back in the 19th and early 20th century, when guys had to free dive 40 to 100 feet to harvest oysters. Back at the shop, our host showed us the process of harvesting the pearls. After clamping the oyster delicately into a vise, she pried the bivalve open just enough so she could fish around inside it to find the precious gem. They do this very gently, because a good oyster can keep creating pearls for around 7 years. After a few seconds, she managed to locate the pearl within and carefully pried it out for us to see. The pearl diving experience is a little pricey at around $300, but the Bora Pearl Company guarantees that you'll go home with a pearl at least that valuable. If the pearl you find isn't worth as much, they replace it with one that is, and if yours is a perfect gem, it could be worth $2,000 or more. Luckily, it turned out our little pearl was a keeper. Tahitian pearls come in myriad shapes and sizes, typically ranging from 9 to 12 millimeters and from perfect circles to drops, baroques, and ringed pearls. The larger the size and the more perfectly round the shape, the more valuable your pearl will be. Once you found your pearl, the jewelers take it back into the shop to drill a hole for stringing, so you can then have it put onto a necklace or bracelet. For an inexpensive souvenir, you can also have them engrave a Tahitian design into an unproductive oyster shell. We had them do a sea turtle for my daughter. This family-owned farm is an incredible tourist attraction, unlike anything else you'll find in Bora Bora. And while pearl diving may be a bit pricey for some people's pockets, the result is a unique Tahitian treat I guarantee you'll never forget.